welcome everybody to the Sunday Trialogues. I got my co-hosts here, Ricardo Calvario and Ethan Indigo. Why don't you introduce yourself, guys? Tell them where they can find you.
Ethan, go ahead.
Oh, well, peace on earth. Honored to be here with
Ricardo.
you guys. Ethan Indigo on all the social media, easy to find, and I'm a writer and observer, philosopher of the world. I write on the esoteric and the exoteric, and always honored to communicate with you guys.
It's great to have you back. It's nice to be back in the swing of things. Go ahead, Ricardo.
So thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Ethan. Good evening, Headless. So my name is Ricardo Calvario. I'm a multidisciplinary researcher. I'm interconnected with the Institute for Natural Philosophy that I'd suggest everyone go and look for in institutefornaturalphilosophy.org. You have my X page on the screen, and I would appreciate if you go and look to my books, The Resonant Earth and Stardust. And that's about it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We've got an interesting show jam-packed together, and I think we're going to go with Ricardo's presentation first. So go ahead and bring it.
Sure. So I have a complex topic, but a very simple idea that I hope most people relate to and find it interesting. So, and let us know in the comments. Which group do you belong to? So first of all, I'm going to discuss something that most people already heard, that it's called anauralia. So this is the silent inner voice, and so it describes like this. So it's a lack of internal monologue. So this talks about individuals that cannot hear their own voice in their head when reading, thinking, or reflecting. So instead of hearing themselves think, they might experience thoughts more as an abstract, silent, or wordless concepts. Others, some people that are a little bit, I don't want to say the word more because I don't want to minimize these people, but some of these people can relate this silence and perceive it as images, emotions, or even physical sensations instead of language. So I must say that although this is not recognized as a disorder, it is part of a growing awareness of let's call it the spectrum of cognitive experience in the whole human consciousness problem. Some researchers do speculate that the inner speech plays a crucial role in our self-reflection, planning, abstract reasoning, and there are others that say that it's merely a tool, so not a requirement for people to be, let's quote, normal. Before we discuss this, there is another that intrigues me more, because I'm a person that if I'm reading or I'm thinking, I'm visualizing things. If someone is talking to me, I'm visualizing it. And there is this condition that is called aphantasia. So it's described as the blind mind's eye. So aphantasia is the neurological condition in which a person cannot voluntarily visualize imagery. They cannot see the pictures in their mind's eye. So the term was coined by a fellow named Dr. Adam Zeman. Is from the University of Exeter, if I remember correctly, and he thought that the phenomenon had been related by some other guy in the 19th century. And so we will look into it and find that people with aphantasia typically have a normal visual perception from the eyes. They have a normal memory. They have a normal intelligence. However, these people tell that they cannot imagine a sunset. Can you figure that out? Let us know in the comments if you can or cannot do it. You cannot imagine the person you love face. You cannot imagine a favorite place. So they experiment no mental imagery at all. So it's like a complete dark canvas in the mind. And the fact that I found interesting when I was looking to this some weeks ago is that the people that have this condition, this aphantasia, they are very surprised to learn that others can have a vivid internal visualization or imagery, and they are completely unaware that the fact that they don't see anything is quite unique. So I'm very curious to learn what you guys think about it. How is your experience in terms of consciousness? What are your ideas about this thing?
Well, that's an interesting concept. It seems like, to me at least, that if you don't know, how could you possibly figure it out on?
Sure.
So what I think it's more like they're thinking in words, or they're thinking in maybe the sounds that make up words, or maybe they visualize letters. Could be, but even that seems doubtful. There has to be some sort of point of reference that's happening within the aphantasia people for them to actually have any sort of cognition at all. But the idea that they're not able to imagine certain objects or visualizations, that seems
A sunset is the most general thing that you can imagine, right?
right.
Or a tree or a symbol or something. Yeah, it's astonishing.
It's happening right now when you mention it. When you say visualize a sunset, a lot of the people just do it unconsciously.
It makes me think about how some of the more remarkable minds and inventors, Einstein and Diesel and Tesla, I think, all shared this quality that they could imagine a thing in their mind, the mechanics of what they wanted to invent entirely in their mind. And Einstein, I mention him because he said something to the effect of, I just think on problems longer than other people. But I think they were all really mechanically adept at visualizing in their mind and constructing even what we might think in their mind, the machines. I tend to have the opposite problem. I can't shut myself up. So I wonder, like with people that don't have the conversations, like, that would be nice. So of course, it's a quality that you look to quiet the mind, even. But yeah, thinking in visualization terms and the inability to do so is even more astonishing. And yeah, just a very different outlook. And yeah, headless, like you said, are they thinking in words? And well, they're not seeing the words, or are they thinking in sounds? And so it just gets really like those who do think in imagery, this is confounding.
Yeah, it's what fascinates me is this border, this broad scenario in human consciousness that go from people that that doesn't have imagery in their minds, they don't have voice in their minds, to the extreme that you were describing, that it's already not above what is considered normal, and it enters in the world of synesthesia. So there are many forms of synesthesia, but one of them is the one that you were describing. People like Tesla that could visualize everything being assembled in front of him, even if he didn't have the complex concept of which part is. He's visualizing, and then he learns what they are in order to build them. So in this realm, we see people with different types of capabilities, but the point is, does this make anyone inferior to another human? I mean, let's exclude synesthesia, because that's almost like a superpower, whatever kind of synesthesia it is, unless it is mine. Mine is very simple. If I step from the shadow to the light, I immediately have to sneeze a number of times, and that passes on from father to son, and that's considered a type of synesthesia. But most of synesthesias are like superpowers, like the ability to sense smell far beyond what humans can do, or hear, or see, or that blind kid that developed a kind of sonar by doing clicks that he could hear within his head. So how do you see this broad? Does this makes us different? Does this only this diversity is useful? How do you see this?
Well, I think if we're talking about handicap versus superpower, I think that it's a hard road to hoe when we're talking about consciousness, because you can get everything you need done in a certain way using a certain type of instruction because it fits with your mental modeling of the world. Whereas people who think too much get confused and they can't see all of the ways that they could get things done just following the instructions. So it's really kind of hard to say whether or not it is. I think for certain, not having the ability to reason in such a way as to find a more acceptable solution than the solutions you've been given could be a superpower, because you're never faced with the problem of ever stepping out of line. I mean, we have to think in terms of like herd mentality and tribe consciousness, and the people who seem to be able to just turn everything off and then keep moving forward almost have an advantage in some ways. But I'm not sure how related this is to emotional states. If they could start to draw those pieces together on how cognition influences emotion and back and forth between the sort of NPC state of not being able to visualize at all and hypercognition, you're going to be able to find that these things impact people in ways very differently.
Yeah, but for instance, you put a group of kids on a kindergarten, right? And you give them some paint, and I doubt no, I know for a fact that 70% of them will draw the sun and the tree or something of the sort, right? So
Yeah.
does that visualization disappears? Because if you cannot visualize, if you don't have images in your brain, how do you paint?
Well, maybe there is the potential that their imagery could come out more refined as they try to process it differently. I'm not saying with certainty, but I think that when we look at it on an individual level, at first it seems like a limitation if they can't do that. But in a collective sense, it might have a place where such fits in, like with wolves, like the sketchy, scared beta or even lower wolf is always looking out for predators and threats, and not that it would do anything about it, but because it gets scared and alerts the other alpha or more powerful beings, then things get done. So I'm not saying it's like wolf pack necessarily, but there's always a place for a mind and its outlook, because they might come up with a new way of thinking, a new way of doing things, in because they have this what we think is initially a limitation.
Yeah. So, but for instance, let's think about a profession where not being able to visualize is very helpful, and it is a profession done only by people that are very bright or very intelligent. For instance, the one that is surging to me is, and I can't say the word. It's astronaut. So an astronaut that is on a ship has to have a highly analytic mind, especially in the first missions where it was a setup. You follow the script. There was no space for imagination, and every problem have a solution in a protocol, or if it doesn't, you are screwed, right? So, and let's compare that to a brain surgeon or a heart surgeon. In the time that is open chest, it's no machines, it's just you and your capability. Perhaps you have to visualize everything ahead of you in order to know what might happen or might not happen, and be ready to a certain number of circumstances.
And
right?
you also have the in the sense of the astronaut, to your point, you have the ability to call home base. I mean, that's part of the protocol, right? Is to get input from others that are of more stability, rather, or whatever.
Yeah, but well, I'm trying to figure out. You are muted, Headless.
What when it comes to the astronaut problem, I think that people naturally gravitate towards the areas where they can, fit in terms of how they, accomplish this kind of thinking. So if you don't have that complex visualization mechanism, you probably won't do too well in the situations where you have to plan ahead and visualize all the different scenarios. And so they'll gravitate more towards areas that maybe don't have that. So I think in a lot of ways, like the people will find their positions fairly readily, just from maybe even subconsciously finding those places where they fit in. Which it talks a little bit about determinism, right? I'm certainly a person with a lot less cognitive ability to visualize something experience a little bit more of the determinism that other people probably don't. And I think that's the limiting factor is the determination on what you can or can't do. But when you open it up, I don't think it's an impossibility to open up this visualization in people that don't have it. But if you don't know how to get to the point, like how do you tell a person how to think without them having the reference point to know? Like, do animals have visualization? Certainly some do, but do
Planning the hunt. Planning the hunt involves visualization.
right? But does a domestic animal have as much visual capacity as a wild animal? Right? So really what we're kind of getting to is the idea of domestication. Are NPCs better domesticated than people who have the ability to visually process things?
Yeah, but when you domesticate an animal that has that imagination, probably is one of those fantastic animals that almost seem that he has learned. It's almost like a human that doesn't speak. So many people had those kind of pets, and then they change pet and realize, well, this one is sweet, but it's completely dumb compared to the other one, right? So I had lots of dogs, and the one that I have now, she's mentally retarded. I'm sorry, but she is not normal. She is not normal. She doesn't understand that we are human and she's a dog. That either we are all dogs or she thinks she's a human. She doesn't have the concept of good and wrong. She doesn't understand it. It doesn't matter how many times we explain to it. She looks at you like, I don't understand anything that you are saying, but I like you. So it depends. And then there's animals that understand everything that we say to them, right? So it's strange, yes. But in terms of the visualization and the application that it can have be beneficial for someone, if you have a life path and a job that only requires you to follow protocol, the lack of visualization is perhaps a good thing, because otherwise you will try constantly to better that protocol, like to note, well, in here it could do better or in there. But if you don't have that kind of process, you just followed the rules that you have to follow, and things always work because it is the protocol was done because it works. But returning to the painters, for instance, or to people that perhaps even more than a painting is sculpture, right? How? Because they say that this famous sculptor used to say that he didn't sculpt the marble; he just exposes the image or the form that is enclosed inside the stone. He's not sculpting it the form. He's taking the excess of the stone to reveal the form that is inside. So he already has a visualization even before he looks. He starts the job. He knows what he is going to do. In painting, you go and you might be going along like channelizing or something. You can just follow your emotions. You perhaps don't need visualization because you are processing at the same time that you are doing it. But I find it. How do you put someone that doesn't have either visualization or inner thought in terms of dialogue? How you put them in a creative position? Is that why there is so few artists, and even fewer that are really good artists? Because there's a lot of artists today, but well, to scramble a little bit of paint in top of a canvas, that's not being an artist. So Do you have any thoughts on this?
I think, well, when you add the domestication angle, I think it's possible for us to lose out on the training and ability to get down into it. So I realize that there's a different level of resolution to visualizations. Back when I was studying Wicca, in the first level Wicca books, they would have exercises where they would try and get you to visualize an apple. You have to visualize the whole thing. You have to look down on it. You have to look up at it. You have to look through it. And when you're at the point where you can perfectly visualize that apple in your head, then you should really ask yourself, where is this visualization taking place actually? Can you actually see on an EEG or whatever, any of these instruments, where this visualization is actually taking place in your inside? And what are you actually working with? Like, for instance, if you download Blender for your computer, right, you can see where you're working with those different, functions inside your machine of what's being produced. But do we have that same type of, I guess, software inside of our heads? That's
I see. You are introducing the algorithm, and he's visualizing the algorithm that you are introducing. So it's translating mathematics into visualization of what you are creating. I see it. It's a good point. Yeah, I like that.
Bingo. So what are we actually dealing with? That's a real question. Are we making sound waves inside of our minds that produce these type of images that you see with what are those machines called that show you the spectroscope, right? Or the things that give you the lines. Is that what we're working with? Are we making visualizations in that way? What exactly is being done to create the thing that we're examining after we've created it in our own minds? And does that have anything to do with the nature of the universe itself?
Sure.
I think it probably does, but on what level, I'm not exactly sure, but something is happening. We can be assured of that.
Sure. It could be exponentials of energy. So you are using a minimal amount of energy to function with your brain and your nervous system to create those images, right? From whatever is being inputted and translated, as you were saying, into those images, right? What is the process that creates those images? But if you increase the exponence of energy, you can reach to the point where you create the universe itself, because everything is connected, right? So there are no two separate things. Each time you have a reaction, that will cause consequences that will ramify into another type of consequence, and so on and so on and so on. So probably that's how you emerge reality from.
Are we inside of a dreamer's dream?
Exactly.
It reminds me that there's this. Oh, go ahead, Headless.
Well, these are all interesting questions that come back to the fundamentals of reality, and I think it would be interesting if we were to try to map the caloric metabolism during visualization. Control the inputs, control the outputs, and then narrow down exactly the caloric metabolism for the apple that's being produced inside of the.
And you just remind me of something. And what happens if we give LSD to these people that don't have imagery? I don't know. I never heard of
I bet
tests
the
like
U.S.
that.
Army did it. I was going to say that it reminds me of a certain polarity of the right and left hemisphere. I'm sure it's not necessarily accurately corresponding in that, but just in polarity terms, that the ability to visualize is very circular and expansive, and the ability to process and do that's maybe useful too. It's very linear and action orientated. It also reminds me something that I don't know a whole lot about, but it's a theory called the bicameral mind that I find interesting. And that theory behind that is that there is the commander and the follower. and the theory kind of points out that that is where a lot of this automatic religiosity kind of manifest in our own minds, thinking, essentially that we're in touch with the beyond, and that we don't think that way any longer. We used to be more oriented in that, but that also reminds me of the experience of many different people when they get into a stress orientation, that they have what is the third man effect, but it's really the second guy. There's where they imagine there is someone there guiding them and helping them along to get out of the potential catastrophic catastrophe that they're facing and trying to get through. It reminds me of that kind of experience.
Is the subconscious mind producing that third man effect?
That's more than likely.
Does that explain angels in some part?
And I don't want to say, I like to refer to the Tibetan Buddhists, or probably Buddhists broadly, that are the gods real or the figment of your imagination? Yes, they're both. So I think even though that answer is confounding and perplexing in itself, I think that's probably more what's going on, even though that doesn't answer it necessarily for us.
It seems our complete ignorance and intentional ignorance of studying consciousness as a field has led us to these impossible definitions, because can something be imaginary and real at the same time? Obviously.
Duality.
Can something imaginary influence something that's real? Well, obviously, that's how we make the plans to create the actual the thing.
And we know that the one doing the experiment conditions the experiment itself, the observation. So it's the thing that you were said that makes me really wonder is the fact that, was it human consciousness and the attempt to understand the environment in a time when we were naked to the world in terms of knowledge? Was that conscious process, that visualization, that created gods themselves into reality? It is the power that we gave them by creating them as these figures that rule the elements and our own lives, made them into existence by our belief that they are there controlling. So they are the masters when we are the ones creating that reality. You see, duality again.
I think there's that, and also historically speaking, I believe there's many instances where they know certain people were attributed with the aspects of God and essentially made into God, right? But they started off as mortals and they did something exceptional, and then everyone started relating things to them. Yes.
This brings up one of my favorite topics, the Philip experiments. You guys ever heard of that? Where these spiritualists, which were also atheists, decided that they were going to create a poltergeist named Philip. And they gave him this big backstory, and they started doing table tipping for over a year to try and get Philip to show him.
Can I ask what time period this was? Sorry to interrupt you. This is great.
I believe it was the 1970s.
Oh, wow.
A lot of the people in the paranormal world were participating in this.
Very interesting.
I think they did it in Lilydale. And they found that they couldn't get in touch with this make-believe spirit, this tulpa of this ghost that never existed, without changing the nature of the environment around them. So they started making everything look like Victorian era Europe, which is where they believe that this backstory on this made-up character lived. And so once they started changing things around, then they started having Philip show up and start to do things that maybe he wasn't supposed to do. So there is this linkage between this idea of consciousness and manifestation that is not really fully fleshed out. And maybe there is something to the idea of perceiving and creating simultaneously that maybe only a few ever understand fully. And we've never met those people because if you
No.
understand that fully, you're out of here, you know?
Well, if they understood it 1%, to us it is fully. So, because we are still completely bewildered by the concept of the meaning of life and the reason for existence, what created the universe. Because when we are talking about humans creating the gods themselves, we cannot create the creation of the universe by that process, right? So because the individual is already, so it's like having a character in a game that you control, and he's creating the game before he even exists. So it's a paradox, right? So you cannot have both things. So you have to have an external consciousness to this universe itself, or to this reality, to this matrix, whatever you want to call it, in order to create it, because otherwise it would come from nothing. It's like Terence McKenna saying, like science explains the beginning of the universe. There is give us a little miracle and we will explain the rest, because they cannot explain the beginning, right? So we live in a world where science is completely based exponentially since that point that they don't understand, and they connect all the physics and all the mathematics and keep them under that same paradigm to explain everything else, and they don't have the beginning. So it's like a thread hanging in nothing. We have the universe hanging from nowhere, because they start on the thread, they don't know where it's hang up to, so everything can be wrong. We might have created everything in the terms of language and concepts to explain something that has nothing to do with reality. And we know that we can think we understand a problem from all angles, and then finally we find that our perception into that sense was completely wrong. Like watching a movie where you think the guy is a villain from the beginning to the end, and in the last 5 minutes you understand that the guy was not the villain, he was the good guy of the video, for instance, or Fight Club, where you discovered that there was no second guy, right? It was just Imagine creating all of that.
Well, do we create these tulpas inside of ourselves when we start to code switch or act differently in different situations? Are we actually creating a spirit? We're acting through it. Are we not creating it simultaneously? So, the personality and all this identity stuff, it's imaginary, but it's also some of the most important stuff in your life. Immediately, without question, on a material basis, who you are changes the nature of what you're doing. And so I've got I guess, experiment or maybe an exercise that sort of exemplifies this. If you close both eyes, right, then you're looking in on yourself, basically. And we don't see a lot because we're used to having all of the images shown to us by the outside world. But when you open one eye and you're looking out at the outside world, but in the other side, you've got nothing but the inner world. And if you start looking in at the same time you're looking out, you start to see that there's a bigger crossover between what's going on inside you versus what's going on outside you. And you can actually start to map and understand your experience a little bit better just by closing one eye.
Yeah, I think that's should be the first quest of anyone that wants to go into any kind of mysticism, any kind of practice. If they don't follow that first, they will have a hard time, because everything in these areas involves the mental process of seeing things as they are before they exist. You have to bring them into existence by seeing. That's why they create these sigils. That's why they use these diagrams, these images. That it's all to help them focus on what they have to want to create or develop. So yeah.
May I say headless? Are you muted?
I was just going to say, you're boosting the caloric intake of those visuals until they become real.
Yeah, real, exactly.
The summation of what you guys just said pertaining to this subject is so wonderful. And I just wanted to inform the audience that we did not plan the subject matter to chorus or as far as the planned choreography of the show, but I just wanted to break down or start to break down what I was going to talk about, because it exactly manifests this idea pertaining to using our mind imagery, if you will, or our mind processes to manifest externally, and these processes that have been hidden and have been steered in a way that sometimes make us think that our contrast or our contrary action and thought is possibly a more right path, but it actually is not necessarily. So all those things that Ricardo and Headless just broke down pertains to what I wanted to talk about. And in brief, I wrote The Matrix of Four, the philosophy of the duality of polarity. The duality of polarity is a big thing, and I use four aspects of each four aspects to really exemplify it in the beginning, but I'll just break down one: arithmetic. Multiplication and division is one polarity of arithmetic, and subtraction and addition is another, the secondary polarity of arithmetic, if you will. And all mathematics is based on these four operations. This polarity concept comes up a lot this duality of polarity concept comes up a lot within the study of the esoteric and the occult and Freemasonry, with literally the dual poles of Yakin and Boaz, which are very much oriented in the sense of a yin-yang model. And I spoke about this on Occult Rejects with Nick, finding the secondary internal polarity in the Tel Arad mound in Israel, where it's basically from about 2,500 years ago. It was buried, and it really reveals a biblical story that's presented in the Bible, and the elimination of a polarity. And the first polarity that did not get eliminated is the Yahweh pole, or altar. And Yahweh is the storm god, the storm creator, right? So this is really one of the primary examples of a powerful destructive force that is actually creative, is a flood. Right. So the storm god, Yahweh, is this creator god through destructive means. The secondary polarity that was destroyed, and we can find tons of different references to it in the Bible. In fact, they say there's 40 references to Asherah in the Bible, most of them pertaining to her being destroyed or her pillar being destroyed. And she is related to cannabis, and one could infer, when we talk about the lessons of self-development and self-empowerment to deal with the gravity of the world socially, and however you want to look at it, if we look at the pole of Yahweh, that has this positive and negative in destructive terms polarity, right? And we see the secondary polarity of Asherah, who is creative in positive, who is creative in positive and negative terms, right? We can find that the Yakin Boaz kind of correspondence, but also the yin yang or Tai Chi lesson too. So we can deal with, I think that a main lesson of this that was eliminated when they eliminated they kind of eliminated both polarities when you eliminate one, because you just get this monolithic, monotheistic idea, and you don't really consider even the contrast that might be within the Yahweh symbolism of this positive and negative in destructive terms, and the Asherah, this positive and negative in creative terms, right? Well, the flood is one way we could look at the kind of hard to decipher polarity aspect. And there's been many negative inventions, there's negative creations all the time, right? So that's the other way to kind of understand that secondary, more subtle polarity. But I think in understanding these two polarities as a formation of our action, it really is where the key is, right? Not in how do gods behave, no, in how do we behave as a developed being, right? So I thought this understanding as the duality of polarity as a self-development or self-activating process is powerful, especially in reference to what we were just talking about, how they hide certain things, and how when we use symbolism toward breaking down different problem solving, different things in our to our benefit and to the benefit of others for that matter. A very godly thing to do, right? If you look at it in biblical terms or religious terms, spiritual terms.
Well, I think you're highlighting one of these main forgotten artifacts of the ancient world, which is that the God's name is its formulation. So when God is talking to Adam in the Garden of Eden, and he says, "You have the ability to name all of these animals." What he's saying is that you're determining their pattern. You're going to understand what makes them up. You're going to basically have the scientific ability to classify them against one another and, against the rest of the world. Basically, you're going to define what it means to be alive on this planet. That's when you put it in those terms, it makes a lot more sense. But if you don't think about what it means to have a name and a formulation, you end up falling into what I call nominative determinism, which is where your name ends up determining what you do for a living. So like a Larry might become a lawyer, because there's a linkage phonetically between the names and the activities being done. And so you see that all the time, like people who were farriers, right? They have a certain type of name, Smith, these are certain types of names. And when you look at what their job position is, that once defined who you were and what you did. So I think the naming of things really does influence their outcomes, which is like this formulation. So the secret names of these gods, in the chat, they were talking about Dispater, which would be the Roman name for Hades. And so when you're looking at the Yahweh formulation, you see the four letters, Yod He Vav He. And what those four letters mean together and how they're used really does determine the naming property. And then you have the 72 names of God. All the time, these formulations are both mathematical and linguistic. So these two concepts really do come together in these God names, and formulations or formulas, algorithms, make up what we see around us. It's just, these are the levels below what is physical. Nothing is pure mathematics. To be pure mathematics, it has no application in reality. There has to be some sort of association. The imagination's one of them.
Yeah. The concept itself of the name being related to a path to be followed in that particular individual's life, I find that curious, because when doing research, I find not the first name, but the last name related with the actual discipline or subject that these people are writing about, right? So I cannot give you any concise examples, but what I found is that these names are rare because they are strange. And yet, the few people that have these names that can be related to a subject or to a discipline, that's the field where they are on. So it's very, very curious in that aspect. in terms of what Ethan was to say, I think it's a deep thought, a deep dive into the concept of duality, the concept that we can have two things at the same time. Like, for instance, from the same object. So an action is good or bad depending on the perspective of who is watching that same action. So from if you are destroying, let's suppose that ants have consciousness. When you're destroying an ant nest because they are invading your house, from your perspective, you're acting good. From the perspective of the ants, you are a psychopath, sociopath that doesn't have any emotions or feelings, that doesn't care to the extermination of millions of individuals, right? So, in terms of inventions, I struggle to find one single invention that could not have a good purpose. Probably there are. Let us know in the comments. I just can't figure out one now that I don't see that can be used for a good purpose. Do you have any idea, Headless? You're going for the mic.
Yeah, I was gonna say, look, we haven't gotten there yet, but when we discover the one thing that is only used for evil, you're gonna be the first one to know. We've been trying all these years, for all of human history, we've been trying to find that one thing that is only purely used for evil. We haven't gotten there yet, but we're getting close.
Well, probably they think they had many times, but then someone came up and discovered that it has a purpose, that it is not only bad, it can be used for some good. I know that
and then the process has to start all
over again. I know that most people that think that. Go on, Ethan.
No, okay. I was going to say the process is very an interesting term, and I don't know what is, or rather, if there is only evil. But I think the most powerful weapon is the mind.
Yes.
Right. And the most powerful defensive or tool against powerful evil is also the mind. One quote from the Bible in reference to the destruction of the Asherah pillars, and then just a real quick note about how powerful mental initiation is. This is 2 Kings 18:4, second Kings 18:4, excuse me. He removed the high places, shattered the sacred pillars, and cut down the Asherah poles. He also demolished the bronze snake called Nehushtan that Moses had made, for up to that time, the Israelites had burned incense to it. So the snake, of course, is wisdom in reference to maybe utilizing the polarity idea. But there is this sense of, in the beginning of the biblical times, there was a destruction of Asherah poles, or the aspect of the one might term look at it too is the one side of the Kabbalah tree, right? That's the removal of a whole consideration of polarity. And then we have monotheism. So we literally were initiated out of this pagan times, if you want to call it that, for lack of a better term, forgive me, into this monotheistic last 2,000 years have been run by monotheists. And even as I was taught in school, it was ridiculous to not have one God up until we were so refined. And so it's almost like an initiation into a model or process. And I've seen this referenced to many times. And I think it does have a symbolic hit, however you want to look at it, however deep you want to get into it. But we recently went into a whole initiation process through the destruction of the Twin Pillars in 9/11, which is very much like the destruction of the
highly
pillars.
Symbolic. Yeah,
highly symbolic. And once you understand the biblical history of it, with the Asherah pillars being really a symbological initiation into the current time span too, right? It's even more hitting.
I think that's very explanatory of what I was going to say when you were halfway. That is, society and cultures are self regulating. So each new individual that comes up to that society or culture is indoctrinated into follow those very same rules, right? So what boggles the mind is to think, how does that originate, right? Because you need to have a source. For instance, for Christianity, you have to have a source for the diffusion of that thought process. You need to have someone to start diffusing that through the world, and it goes moving on and on and on. But in terms of rules, like we can understand a simple rule like you shall not kill, right? Any society, you don't. It's easy to understand how that comes to. But if you go and start putting like you have to give 40% of your income to the state, right? And you think, why? I'm the one working, so why do I have to do that, right? I could understand 5% or something, or right, but I have to have almost half of what I work to some individual that is ruling and taking care of me. I can take care of myself. I don't need that. So there are some rules that it to me is quite hard to understand how they come from one individual. It's like, for instance, the Portugal itself. You had this Iberians living in a regime that allows them to have land, to produce their own food, to do trade, and all they have to do is give 5% to the Moors, that were the Islamic peoples that are occupying the territory, right? Which is great because they came out of a feudal regime where they didn't have land. Everything they produced in their own home has to be given 10% to the Lord, and they are eternally in the service of the Lord. Everything is of the Lord. They are just allowed to be there. And then you see these Templars arriving with this new king, right? Bringing them back to feudalism, and you see the populations following that, like a kind of hypnotism against themselves, right? So how does this originate? How does this process of changing a society, like the demolition of the towers, that creates a new mind process where some new rules will be accepted into the culture, into the society, because everyone sees that they have to be done. Something has to be done, even if we are to lose liberties or to lose anything that we had before. And so it's like David Icke says, is problem, reaction, solution. If you are able to create the problem, so if you start saying that the Moors are savages and vile creatures and they are don't belong here and they are the outsider, and you can inflame that, like Hitler managed to inflame Germany, because many of what he's saying, it was right to them. They were being highly oppressed at that time by several European rules. So I think it's all a matter of the right time and the right place in order to be able to change a culture or a society. And sometimes those moments are created, and they learn how to create those elements. Like the taking down of the towers. It's a classical example of how to change a global culture, because they change not only the states, they change the whole world, and how we behave and how we see ourselves and how we start to doubt of everyone that is foreigner, or I don't know. I'm sorry, I just rambled a little bit here, but I think it's interesting.
So I might have something interesting about the snake that Moses had in the desert, right? They tore that down because they were burning incense to it. What does that really mean? So I looked up the Phoenician god of healing, and I found this Eshmun character. And Eshmun is the divine healer of the Phoenicians. He was the ancient Phoenician god of healing, held significant position in the pantheon of the religion, worshipped in the city of Sidon. His temple, originally built in the 7th century BC, evolved over time with additions by various monarchs. Eshman's cult extended beyond the public religion, encompassing popular and private beliefs associated with the god Baal in Syrian tradition. Eshman's divinity represented the health, wealth, and salvation of the community. Remnants of his sanctuary has been found in Sidon, showcasing the importance of his worship in the ancient Near East region. Eshman, the god of healing, originated from an ancient Phoenician mythology. He was initially a nature deity and a god of spring vegetation. Over time, Eshman's divine attributes evolved as the Phoenician pantheon evolved, acquiring celestial and cosmic characteristics. The mythology surrounding Eshman tells the story of his transformation into a celestial god after being pursued by Astarte, goddess of love. This mythological tale highlights his significance in Phoenician beliefs. So this is a blending of all these different Babylonian and other sources, because they were ruled over by the Neo-Assyrians in 700 BCE.
I would, to build on that, the biblical reference there to frankincense was kind of that it is negative, because it was used to these negative gods.
No, they burned it in all their temples. That they just didn't do it to any other gods.
They still do on the Vatican. They still burn.
No, frankincense is highly valued. I believe that they were upset that they were giving this honor of burning frankincense to a god that was not Yahweh, that's to that point, at Tel Arad, this mound where they found the dual pillars, and the pillars at that point and in time and place represented God. So they know that these were Yahweh and Asherah poles. They found on Yahweh frankincense. On Asherah, they found cannabis. So in the Holy of Holies, that is reference to Solomon's temple, it was certainly the fact that they burned frankincense and cannabis. So I think you're right, they revered frankincense, but in reference to that thing, they were very upset about it because there was Asherah involved, and the notice, the understanding of Baal and El too, which were biblical reference. Now we consider them all to be the same. Oh, they're just the same. But back then they were distinct, right?
Astarte and Asherah are not cognates. What is it called? They're syncretized together.
Certainly,
so these two concepts are right there. Also, it said God of nature, right? So I assume that Cannabasum would definitely be burned to Esher too, or Asher. What's his name? Eshman. And so Eshman has those elements that you're talking about. They had to tear that out, they had to get rid of it because it was Phoenician, because it was Canaanite.
Yeah, but this persecution
and feminine. Sorry, Ricardo.
No, not all. This persecution. Go on.
It was the snake as well, just like Asclepius. Asclepius is the Greek version of Eshman.
Yep.
And they took the water for the daily baths from the Asclepius River. And so all of this snake imagery is right there, and they're rejecting what their neighbors are doing and the things that they were doing in that little chapter in Kings. And you can see all the parallels too. So unless you understand the context that's going on around what the stories are in the Bible, you really don't know what's going on in the Bible.
And the spring garden is really, for me, in symbological terms, a reference to one of these four polarizing energies: the spring energy, the life-giving force that's positive, rather than the opposite, fall, or and winter, its complement. Sorry, Ricardo.
No, that's what you're saying now. Is it reminds me of if we extrapolate the 4 seasons into the great year, right? You have the same process. This is where you have birth, where you have decay, where you have plenty, where you have the cold, and that reflects in almost all cosmologies and mythologies around the world.
Absolutely.
But in terms of the snake, I find it extremely interesting. The fact that if we go to the megalithic world, the snake was the only revered deity that they would sculpt, that they would gather around, they would terraform to create them. It was a symbol of knowledge, of life, of experience. And all of a sudden, you see that these all different religions emerging, and they are all attacking the same thing. Let's kill the snake. Let's cut the head of the snake.
Monotheism came. It very much like monotheism came in.
Right. The snake's always wrapped around the pole. You know?
Exactly.
It's got those
Got the seals.
right there. So you've got the 4 pillars of heaven have the snake around it, and they're like, we've got to get rid of that thing, but they can't. They never get rid of it.
Yeah, but
It's always there.
I would point out that one way to comprehend the word tetragrammaton that you referenced earlier, Headless, is 4 grammar, right? It's not just 4 measure, which would be pentagram, a similar word form for 5 gram, 5 measure. But so tetragram would be 4 measure, but tetragrammaton is in fact kind of like tetragrammation or tetragrammer. So it's actually a kind of a whole way of comprehending things is the dual pole. How we emit action into the world. Ricardo, sorry.
and could it be the extrapolation of the original form into its holographic, completely free form, the tetragrammaton? Instead of the tetragram,
I think some ways, I think what the tetragrammaton really kind of represents is rule over man, right? Because it's these 4 pillars that are always surrounding sort of the temple of the world. And this is where man is. And the only way to, understand the sky is being held up by pillars, right? So the idea of the sky god, the 4 pillars, all encompassing around mankind. And
in the middle with the gods as the ceiling, as the overall doom, imminent doom. If the pillars fail, they'd fall on them.
In the exoteric kind of interpretation of it, absolutely. If one is looking to control people or a place, that is a way to use it. In the esoteric way, it's kind of like a way to build self. Hopefully not in that direction, but just to excuse me.
Yeah, but why would knowledge, the serpent in terms of knowledge, of wisdom, of experience, why would it be rejected? Why is it so wrong?
I'll get there.
To be aware. Go on.
What are the 4 pillars of any society? It's the 4 castes of people, right? So you've got labor, you've got the people who ship, buy and sell things. These are the entrepreneurs.
The traders, yeah.
That would be like water. You've got earth, you've got water, you've got the military, which protect all of those goods, protect all of those important people. That would be fire. So you've got earth, water, fire, and then air would be the teacher class. This would be like the people who train the next generation. They bring the knowledge into that society. You have to have them so that you can have a functioning society. And then between all of these different polarities, you've got the different institutions in society. So let's say the government would be between the military and the teacher class. It would be right in that sort of positive XY axis, right? And then all of these other institutions, you can map on that graph as well, being related to these functions. Well, if you understand society in that way, you could understand why you wouldn't want to have cross-contamination of these different forms of intelligence going from one part to the other, because you can't really have as much control if you don't narrow that down. So you've got to have religions that preach things like info hazard. Certain ideas are too dangerous for you to even know. And if you've got them on that level of, this is the mental glass ceiling we're inputting into society, then you can more easily control what their output would be and all the rest of these things. You're adding the dials into society through the religion.
Yeah, it makes sense. You generated silence. You finished.
Well, it's almost like the best way to understand someone is where are you from and under what belief system, right? Like, where do you start out? Okay, well, you could be an anomaly and not even be close to what I think that might result in, or you could be somewhere close to that.
Yeah, but is it a good thing to have that established before death? Any of that? Does that means that you are no longer looking into? You found your place, you find your position, you find your belief. There's no more need to evolve. There's no more need to
I think that
expand.
that is what monotheism kind of deduces, right? I, I think it kind of leads to that deduction, rather.
Well, there's a natural degeneration in society when you reach the top rungs of that forecast system, right? Dominance leads to decadence. Decadence leads to degeneracy, and degeneracy leads to destruction. So the people on top are looking down at us, thinking about how they can lose their power, thinking about how they needed to divide up these different resources so that these people down here can't get to the people up there. And the number one way of doing that is by miseducating them and keeping certain facts away from them. And we see that same cycle occurring over and over and over again throughout history as these inversions of the natural system that allows us to name the stuff around us. We don't really have the ability to name the world around us anymore because it's all input into our heads already by people who have input those mental glass ceilings.
Yeah.
So
And
once you control that, you control basically everything else.
why so many times those in power selected people from the public that they could manipulate or allure to their own power because they knew that they won't follow the elite, but they will follow one of their own. So they pick one that the public looks into. They see if they can buy it, and they use it to control the population. So basically, that's what we have with politicians right now, because families have removed themselves from sight, and now we have. Although we see, if we, for instance, in Portugal, if we go and see the line of politicians, they are all from. You can perhaps 10 families, 15 families. They are always the same. They just one come in and the other come out, but they are always the same. Pre-revolution and after revolution. So, so it's always the same. Only the perception of the public changes, but the power remains the same, which is a pretty trick if we think about it. It's like Elivander says, it's terrible but great. I admire the fact that they have so many nets, so vast systems, that every time that someone awakes and discovers a loop, they have a number of networks to capture that person into another loop and keep it going in there. So it's very hard to. Most people think they are aware, but the only thing that we should be aware is that we don't know what we don't know. So and they know a little bit more than we do, unfortunately, and that's how they be able to control us.
I think it's all about specialization. All of these different fields stay so separate from one another, they end up not benefiting at all from the knowledge being generated in other fields. So they're completely siloed into this, single perception of how things ought to be. And that is in direct conflict to the other silos that are acting on behalf of the institutions onto the public. So silo after silo after silo, completely different rules for completely different ways of thinking that have to be imposed. So they don't really match up. And this is really where we see the bloat in all of the institutions, because they're no longer generating any kind of interest in what the public is doing as much as they are self-interested in their goals. So that's going to happen when you don't have a cohesive vision for society and all these different sectors that don't go away when you scale things up. They think that we're on a level now where we can't really endure, or we can't really have another depression because production is just so quick.
Yeah.
But they're taking everything for granted at this point, and they're not paying any attention to the cohesiveness in the society that's around them. I mean, it's a Jenga house, and they keep knocking out the bricks.
Well, it reminds me of this. In a perfect world, in America, it's a little bit different because you have another type of sports. But let's imagine soccer. Okay, you have this vast number of clubs, and what should be entertaining about soccer is the clubs are there to fight for themselves, but we as the public are here to watch them play, not to adore them or to select one club. but to watch them play as overall. And whoever wins, wins. And so everyone goes to a game, and no one has favorites. They are there for a show, for a spectacle, right? Instead, no. Instead, we focus ourselves into this player or to this team, and we are capable of doing the greatest atrocities just because someone said that that guy was lame. Or so that's how deep we can be manipulated by any of these concepts that they developed to imprison the individual within the society, right? I know it's a may be a stupid example, but it's to me it's a clear one. How you lose the broader perspective of what is a global sport, and you get focused just on that section, right? And that's narrowing of perception of reality that allows them to keep us in control and in check, even though they are somewhat not really sure of what they're doing. They're just spreading seeds out there, but we are catching them and we are selecting them for ourselves.
Well, imagine the narrowing perspective of having the ability to look up whatever you want to see at any time during the day or night. It limits you to just the things you want to see and not the things that, might be needed that you don't know because you're focused on only seeing that one thing. So while some people believe that the internet is broadening everyone's horizons, what if it's actually narrowing them down to very, very specific areas and limiting the perceptive ability of those individuals?
Sure. That wouldn't be a bad thing if then they all talked with one another and they used that narrow experience, vast experience in that narrow subject and then try to relate it. But it doesn't happen because people tend to defend that little narrow band to the limits, to the further extents, without letting anything in or out, because that's the truth. That's that little bit piece, that flower that's there. It's the only flower that exists in the whole world. The other ones are just meaningless.
It's those bricks of social cohesion that they keep knocking out of the Jenga pile, make people not trust each other anymore.
Exactly.
Not want to talk with each other, not want to be around each other.
Look,
I knocking out those bricks.
I took much more from, for instance, let's suppose that I have 5,000 documentaries or presentations in my collection for the last 30 years. I learned much more from the 90% of the videos that I have that I don't agree with than with the 10% that's just saying, oh, yes, I think the same. I believe the same things that you do. Because I gain nothing from them. It is by looking all of those that I don't believe in and I think that they are wrong for this or that reason, that I learned why they are wrong. In some of them, I learned, no, you are right. I was the one wrong. After all, you were right? Because I can take this little piece from this documentary, that little piece from what presentation, and not throw the baby with the bathwater. Because there's always something to be learned. And what happens with the internet is we pick one subject and we focus on it, and then the algorithm keeps giving us the same stuff and the same stuff and the same stuff, and it becomes global. It's like you are forced from a child to go into a religion and you have never had a choice, or your father liked that team and you grow into like the same team. There is no choice in that. There is no thought process. There is no analysis. There is just acceptance. And sorry, Ethan, I cut you off.
No, great build. I was just going to say a phrase that I have adopted that's a Taoist kind of idea that really actually helps me refine my thinking and my practice, whatever it may be. Great doubt, great awakening. Little doubt, little awakening. No doubt, no awakening. And so just giving myself a little bit of like criticism, like just to start out with the idea of the Platonic or Socratic idea that I know nothing, right? Like and just to put my belief systems in check actually is a process like those documentaries that I might not agree with. Oh, now I learned better. I don't necessarily agree with them in totally, or whatever. Now I just know what they know, and that's more than I knew before. And so, yeah, just a little bit of doubt like goes a long way,
Sure.
That
Look,
goes,
if
that goes to the heart of the issue, I believe, when it comes to the establishment. It's because they have no doubt in what they are doing.
Totally right. and they actually formulate their presentation to not have any doubt. Government, the higher aspect of government, the more likely this is true. There's no doubt that 100% this new mandate is going to work to your benefit, and we're going to send you, $1,000 rebate to let you know for sure that it does.
But you need a new man for a new mandate, which takes us right back to those NPCs who can't see images in their heads.
Yeah, but they can see a guy offer them chips and hamburgers in terms of a vaccine.
It does make me wonder how much of that is related to the easy steering of people headless, as you're elucidating or alluding to. That, wow, like if you can't envision imagery of the present, how can you envision imagery of the future? Like, can you even conceptualize a bunch of different moves in the format? You can't conceptualize the board. Like, how
eternal now. We live in the eternal
like maybe now. Yeah.
How do you play chess?
That's what I'm saying. Like, you can't. I mean, it's one thing to see the board in front of you, but can you visualize 3 moves in front of you that way?
Yeah,
I wonder.
The plan.
Maybe they can. Maybe they can in a better format. I don't know. I'm ignorant, but it does make me question how much of that like order follower, ignorant kind of trust the plan mentality is, and has played out historically, and how much of that is due to people's inability to process things and look at potentials. Like, they've lied before. You think these guys don't lie all of a sudden, like, because they have a different style.
I can tell you this. A dear friend of mine had a girlfriend at some point, and she came from somewhere in the interior of the country. So we are not very developed, but there are areas that are even less developed. And so what I found fascinating about this girl is that she never thought in her life, after 20 years, on where did the world come from? What led us to here? In her mind, everything that we see had ever been as she's seen. Ever. There was no concept that there is some kind of evolution to get us to this point. So everything was the same. Every tree was the same. Every aspect of society was the same. There is no change at all unless the 4 seasons that conditionate the living. The rest has always been the same. There is no critical thought on whatsoever about the past, the future. No, it's just here and now, and everything has been as it is now. There's nothing to think about. And I find that fascinating. How many people are there that think that way? And does that give you some kind of freedom? It's like the blue pill, right? Like I don't want to remember.
Good quality to have sometimes. Yeah.
It's like, I know this steak is not real. There is an algorithm that creates a bodily sensation when I'm eating it, right? But I prefer the idea that I don't know how that process, and I can just enjoy the steak, whatever, no matter how fake it is. Because is it fake when you are actually feeling it? It isn't fake, right? It all a concept of how accept reality.
Is it any coincidence that the baby boomers are the first generation raised exclusively on television?
Right.
Here we are. So I had something to present.
Go on.
I just got done with this painting. Yeah. And I call it Omphalos. So this is my painting. And if you've been following me on social media, there's an offer.
Keep it in the screen for a little bit longer, Headless, if you will. If you can.
Right. So there's an offer that's going along with this painting. If you have occult knowledge, arcane, secret, occult knowledge that I haven't really been exposed to before, that you think you can offer for this painting, I would be willing to part with it for something like that. Because I figure I'm making things that are worth more than money. So I want to experience the knowledge and things associated with more than money. So I figure, why not nail the two together and see what you get? So I've gotten some stories that are pretty impressive. Like there was a Shriner, the Shriners, they're a subset of the Freemasons. There was a Shriner baby farm here in Wisconsin. And I got the newspaper clippings all about it, which is pretty damn weird. The Shriners set up a baby farm, literally a baby. They were farming human babies here in Wisconsin. The Shriners. That's pretty crazy.
What purpose? Do you know?
To have workers and everything you could use a human for.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a genetic experiment or something like that. No.
It probably was. This was back in the 1930s, but I think that's still pretty freaking weird. And then I got another message about a ectoplasm experience. And I got to see a video of this ectoplasmic entity actually attacking a person. They videotaped themselves sleeping, and they caught on video this ectoplasm attack. I think is also pretty fucking cool. And I got a third offer of a full-on planetarily aligned poem for my own personal purposes. So these are the three offers on the table now. After this, hopefully I get some more offers of secret arcane knowledge, and I will get this thing framed tomorrow. By then, I'll have made my decision. So if you have any input, I'd love to hear it.
Sure. Well, bring it on to Headless. I want to hear more about that ectoplasm. So what size it was?
It looked like kind of a mixture between like a wad of spit, like a real bad loogie, and kind of a demonic figure, right? It was kind of white and wispy, and it looked like it was moving in reverse. Like if the tape was being played backwards, it looked like moving like that. It's odd, but it matches up with all of the classical, visions that people have had of this ectoplasm at, spiritualist seances and stuff like that. This ectoplasm would exit either through the nose or the mouth and then make shapes and figures in the air and have this weird gossamer-like texture. And what's really interesting about the ectoplasm is that the United States government did lots of MK Ultra experiments trying to extract this plasma because I believe certain paranormal researchers had postulated that the ectoplasm is a form of gaseous life. And this gaseous life is connected to the life essence of the person that's exuding it. And maybe it can be shaped and formed by spiritual presence or spiritual knowledge. And so that's what you see exiting the person in these seances is some sort of deep spiritual essence that is connected to the origin of life.
And why does it become evil if it comes from the person? Does that mean that the person is evil, or
it's not necessarily all about the person? Maybe this is the form that's being sucked out of the person so this other entity can take shape in it. So it doesn't seem like it's maybe conscious, but it's using that sort of essence from the person to attack that person.
Your description of that, even though it was from a Western scientist model, could have been a Taoist shamanic view of how spiritual essences move, just to point out, like right on parallel.
This was an attack that went on over and over and over again, but this was just one of the times that it was caught on camera.
Yeah, sure.
Because, right. So this thing had actually had some other, demonic presences. And so it's odd. The person who told me about it told me that they got rid of it. But at the same time, that's pretty impressive. Like ectoplasm is one of those rare phenomena in paranormal research that doesn't have a lot of eyes on it anymore, at least that we know about. But it's a lot of people who are.
But how do you create such a thing, knowing what it is, and you don't contain it? Like a large petri disk or something. How do you not contain it?
Well, the spiritualist practices was that one of these mediums would get into a really, really deep state of trance. And then they'll start to channel something that will manifest as this ectoplasm. And so in these environments, they'd have photographs taken of the low light conditions. So over time lapse and things like that, you could see these luminous, weird spit shaped things. Sometimes it would come out in the form of lace. And if you look back into
Does it look like kefir growing?
kefir,
Yeah, kefir is what most people consider that was the manna. So kefir is kind of a milk that you pour something into a dish and it keeps growing every single day. It doesn't stop.
it
It
could
keeps.
be related to that. I've heard of some alchemical practices using the dew during certain times of the year. And what you do is you take that dew and you collect it over, the certain days, like you would say the summer solstice or whatnot, and then you would store it inside of a oak barrel, and then you will get what they call the gur that forms from the dew. So it's like this wispy white fungal
Yeah,
substance.
exactly. That's it.
And that fungal substance can then be refined and used in the process of making the philosopher's stone. That's called the wet path.
Hmm. Okay. So this culture that still use it. If you go to the supermarket, you'll see kefir on sale, on the section of milk probably. What fascinates me, because I've seen it in person, is that you cut it and you use it to eat it, right? And in the next day, he's grown again, right? From whatever it came, but it keeps multiplying itself constantly. So that's why they think that the dew that you were talking about, that fell on the manna, then would make it grow, and every single day they would have the same manna to eat. Right? That's why many people consider it to be, it's that relation between the dew and the element itself.
And the philosopher's stone,
That-
constantly reproducing itself. Multiplication is one of the powers of the philosopher's stone.
Mhm.
So that kind of brings up this painting. I call it the omphalos. And the omphalos is considered the navel of the world. So, it looks like a moon and these rabbits associated with the moon, but at the same time, it could be a zygote. It could be a cell that's dividing inside of the womb. And you've got, sort of the honeybee symbolism also associated with, motherhood, queen bee. This is sort of the royal womb. And so the whole idea rotates around that concept as well, with the vault nut being sort of the symbol that is binding and unbinding, associated with this kind of watery womb type situation going on with the two rabbits that are dividing inside of the cell, which kind of looks like a moon as well. So you've got multiple levels happening at the same time.
Mhm.
And so I thought, people who know these symbols could probably relate to it pretty well and actually use it for a lot of energetic purposes. So
when
I
I
think
when I looked at it, I thought of cosmic creation. That's what I thought, like the immersion.
bingo. Yeah. So if you have any offers, if you're watching this and you want to use this for a spell
I
or
wanted
whatnot,
I wanted to ask you, Headless, about the bees.
yes. Well,
Why
at
did
the
you
Oracle at
include-
Delphi, they had this priesthood class called the Melissae. And the Melissae were bee priestesses. So they had the sacred honey and all the rest of these things associated with the Oracle at Delphi. And so that Oracle at
Mel
Delphi,
Mel is the word in Portuguese for honey.
there we go. Melissae, yeah, it comes from the Greek. And these bee priestesses would be associated with the omphalos at Delphi, which was the navel of the world. Zeus releases two eagles. They went around the world and found the center point, which just happened to be in Greece, right below Mount Parnassus. And that's the Oracle at Delphi. So they constructed this omphalos, which looks like a stone in the shape of a beehive. Right? So this beehive stone has a net on the outside of it, because when it was retrieved from Kronos's belly, this is the stone that was wrapped in a blanket and used as the replacement for Zeus, right? So he ate it thinking it was his son, but it was really a stone. They had to pull it out again. So they put a net over top of the stone, and the net actually looks like bees crawling on a beehive.
Hmm.
So you've got this origin story, you've got, this place of power and everything else associated with this beehive, and the beehive associated with this springing forth of life. And also words. I believe that, the beehive being depicted at Delphi has to do with the keeper of language. And that has to do with the origin of prophecy as well. So there's a concept of not just the beehive being a place, but also being the Akashic record, and accessing this beehive Akashic record, I think, is where the origin of language comes from. It's sort of like a shamanic thing having to do with this mad honey.
Yeah,
So,
and we know that the hexagonal shape is the perfect shape for not allowing any impurities or evil or contamination into it. So everything touches fully on everything. So probably it's the best way to create a matrix without holes, right? Sorry to interrupt you, but it just occurred to me.
right, and this whole idea is really closely associated, I believe, with the womb. So everything's sort of being put in there through epigenetics and through
Well,
genetics.
that hexagonal reproduction is very much a matrix, right? From out of which flows the same unit, but also everything else. But just to build on that, but it's interesting too to me since then how many occult and secret societies and people claiming to be such have referenced themselves with the bee, right? The Freemasonry, the state of Utah is all about the bee. You can see it being used, and in a positive sense, which you guys being positive just touched on, is the esoteric, right? And the exoteric might be interpreted as one monotheistic controller over the whole hive, right? So not to take away, just to add on to it, but that's
Yeah, it just trade the feminine from into masculine, and there you have it.
right. Or there's the dual pulse again.
Yeah.
That's dope.
Right. So
And
I
it's
thought,
very much it's like a mandala too, and it's the fourfold and even eightfold kind of mad orientation of it.
right, and the water really did call out. That's what inspired me to finish it, because this thing has been sitting over on my to-do list for a long time. And once I started painting the water on the sides, it's like, wow, it all just came together in an instant. So I started this months ago, and then it's like, once you get that flash of inspiration, you've got to act on it. So everything else, can come into play. So I think it's a pretty potent symbol. So if you've got anything you want to trade that would be on equal footing of magical potential, let me know. And I'm definitely going to get this framed, sign it, and put it out there. You guys can do with it what you want. I'm not against you selling it if you can, But I want to trade this for occult, arcane knowledge on equal footing with the painting.
Well,
so
someone is developing a ritual that involves burning and transforming the essence of the painting into ashes.
That's fine. They can do with it what they want. If you do it on camera, even better. Make your own art from it, Use it in a spell. That's what I'm hoping for.
It's dope.
So that's our trialogue this week. I'm glad everybody joined in with us. Oh, what's that?
That's the new cycle that my daughter is painting. It's energy from circles. And
very nice. I love it. Reminds me
still
of a
not
pond.
finished. Yeah.
Throwing.
It's like stones. It's like stones falling on peaceful water, and then
radiating outward.
Yeah.
Well, join us again next week, and go ahead and tell them where they can find you guys. Tell them about what you've been working on.
Ricardo, I'm on all the usual suspects of social media, easy to find. I have a few books on Amazon and so forth, and always appreciate communication. A new article coming out soon, so appreciate connecting.
Thank you. So in my case, you can find me at the name that is on the screen, Ricardo Calvary 1 at X. Again, my suggestion: go to the institutefornaturalphilosophy.org. Watch our magazine. The new issue is almost going to be released soon, And you have our store, so it's the best way you have to support us right now. There's interesting books, there's many articles that you can choose from to help us and support us. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed all.
Thank you. And you guys can find me on Thursday nights with my co-host Nick. We go through your emails. If you have an offer, use that same email address, headlessgiantpodcast@gmail.com, and I will check in with you. Tomorrow, I'll make my decision. If you're watching on X, you will know who I've decided to go with, and we will see where we go with from there. So thank you. Use your inspiration to find stuff that's worth more than money. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Great perspective.
Yeah, knowledge is invaluable.
Absolutely. And we will catch you again next time.